Thank you. We have our other healthcare professional on the other side of the aisle here, Mr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to take just a moment. Chairman Dingell discussed the visitors and guests that we have in the hearing today. And Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I want to point out we have visitors and guests from my district back in Texas. Marcia Gray has brought her history and government class with her from South Lake, Texas, Carroll High School. Is it Carroll High School? It's Carroll Senior High. They wanted to learn and see what government looked like firsthand, up close and personal. And I said it doesn't get any more up close and personal than the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health. So I appreciate them traveling all the way from Texas to be here today and to witness the hearing that we have going on. Ms. Beckett, I just wanted to follow up on the point that you just made on the CMS rule. And now that rule has been put out, the notice of proposed rulemaking has gone forward, and now that rule has been finalized by CMS? So this is something that would take legislative activity on the part of the Congress to reverse that.
Well, I think there's an opportunity for you to address it in a hearing to begin with, how the impact itself could. We have a current moratorium on it, so we have like 6 months to collect some information about what's going on, and I think that would be very helpful if we could look at what the impact could be on that.
Well, just on a structural question, and maybe, Mr. Chairman, I should ask you that some of the things move with such glacial speed around here. Perhaps we could ask for another moratorium in the Labor HHS appropriations bill when that comes up this summer. Is that where this came from? The moratorium came from in the first place? Mm-hmm. Okay, Mr. Chairman, are you aware? Is there an actual proposed piece of legislation out there that will deal with this rule from CMS?
I'm sorry.
No, the rule as it affects the caregiver statute, the levels of funding. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of anything, but obviously, we're trying to address some of these with the committee as well. But no, I'm not aware of any legislation.
Well, it may be a joint project the committee can take up as we approach the appropriation this summer, so we can get a little bit more time to study what the actual impact of this will be and make certain we don't do something in a vacuum of knowledge, which of course would never, ever happen up here. Mr. Ronfeld, I wanted to just, and probably Dr. Rowland, I need to involve you in this. And I'm sorry I stepped out when you were talking to Chairman Deal about, or Ranking Member Deal about the inflexibility issue. You brought up the point and made a point of talking about the inflexibility of some of the waivers with which you have to deal. And I mean, I'll just tell you, I haven't been here that long, but looking at a system that provides care to some of the most vulnerable citizens in the United States and requires, what, 28 waivers for it to work properly? I mean, it doesn't, on the face of it, it's not a sound basis that we built it on. But talk to us a little bit more about the inflexibility of waivers that you've had to deal with.
Well, a lot of the inflexibility that we speak of does not necessarily deal with providing services. It deals with the administration. It deals with costs that are outside of actually delivering the services. The amount of time and effort it takes to document the services provided. We have seen situations where every 15 minutes a direct support professional has to fill out what they've done, which takes away from providing care. In Indiana, a few years ago, they actually reduced our rates and cut $14 million out of their budget. But with that cut, they simplified the system, and they were able to spend that $14 million to serve more people. And what I mean by that is that they went to a per diem type system based on level of need, so not everybody fit in the same category. It wasn't a capitated type of system, but it took away the necessity of all the documentation, all the paperwork.
Let me just ask you, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to run out of time. Is the move to more electronic record keeping, would that be an enhancement in your mind in that type of activity? Does anybody actually read the reports that are generated every 15 minutes?
Well, that would be an enhancement, but to kind of simplify things and oversimplify things to a point, outcomes are about the people receiving services. Ask them and their families what they think. Don't read that on a piece of paper. They can tell you if they're receiving the quality services or not, and that's what outcomes should be about.
Very good. And just the seconds I have left, Dr. Rowland, I mean, I've never been a big fan of capitation, but tell tell me again what the concerns you had with the capitated system that you were discussing?
Well, we were looking at the Florida reforms that were put into place in Broward County. Specifically, there was a lawsuit actually filed yesterday by some of the beneficiaries of that program about the fact that it's very difficult when you're dealing with people with severe disabilities to establish the right level of risk-adjusted capitation, and the way in which that program was structured, the health plans were given the ability to modify the benefit package to live within the capitated amount.
I'm going to interrupt you again. Is that because there wasn't a correct assessment of risk going in?
I think that it's a very new area of trying to do the assessment of risk right, and I think the risk assessment was not necessarily going to match the beneficiary's needs, so the plans were given under the waiver additional discretion to modify the benefit package, and several did, but it meant that the beneficiaries felt they were not getting the full range of services they needed. And I think it just points out the very difficulty of figuring out in advance prospectively for some of the most disabled people exactly what the right capitation amount would be, and calls for the need to have some flexible corridors around which you operate.
I don't disagree that, of course, that's the whole tenet of capitation, but at the same time, a system that learns ought to be capable over time of making those adjustments so that if capitation is what the state decides they want to do, is there not a way with...
Let me ask you, Doctor, I'm sorry, Dr. Burgess, but I wanted to get one more person in before we...
I'm going to submit that question in writing, and I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just mention to the subcommittee, we have, I guess, 8.5 minutes left. We're going to have a 15-minute vote and then 2 5-minute votes. So what I'm going to ask is Ms. Baldwin if she would go next, and then we'll recess until we come back for those votes.